There's a question here about the Gini coefficient that you just mentioned. This is from Ravi Philemon, who is the General Secretary of the Red Dot United. You pointed out that the Gini coefficient is not a sufficient measure of inequality. So similarly, the GDP may not be a good measure of human well-being. Do you think, are we on the right path by using and maybe overly relying on GDP as a planning tool?
We don't rely on the GDP as a be-all and end-all planning tool. It's just the one that gets the most attention. Not just the government, the media, the popular commentary, right? The most important variable, I would say, is the rate of growth in median wages. The reason why advanced countries have so much, the consensus in favor of the market, in favor of globalization, and existing structures are breaking down is because of stagnation in the middle class. And I think I mentioned this. It goes back to the wisdom of Aristotle and so on, that if the middle doesn't feel confident of their future, democracy suffers. So we need to ensure that the median wage continues to grow well. So far, we've achieved that, which is why I think broadly things are okay in Singapore. We have a low-wage worker problem, quite a serious one. But at the median, we're doing well. And we need to sustain it. It's not easy. And so we'll need to, all the more, we need to professionalize. So more than GDP, I would personally look at median wage growth, how it's doing. But GDP is a good major cause of median wage growth. People who criticize the GDP growth number need to realize what are the alternatives. Actually, what you need is a composite of a few, which is what the government always does. And I think in the Ministry of Finance, the public sector outcomes reports they put out, they look at a whole range of indicators. GDP is just one of them. Inflation, wage growth, and your human indices are very important. Life expectancy, and so on. You can't put all of them into one index. It doesn't make sense. So you just have to look at about 5 or 10 or 12 indices that describe collectively human welfare. A GDP is just one of them. And GDP is a very good enabler. I said earlier on, why we did well in this decade in median wage growth than the previous decade. And a lot of it has to do with GDP growth. Because GDP growth was good, and because it also happened to be widespread, and a good part of it from 2015 onwards came from productivity growth, wages were held up at the median. So we got to continue to emphasize that. So it's a necessary condition, but not a sufficient condition. So let's not discard the GDP growth, but let's not worship GDP growth as if it's the only thing.